Oh, yes.
Okay, so we're going to start with the trio. So I think the ribbons, you can kind of tear them yourself. And this gentleman's going to help Ruth with the cutting, is that correct?
Yes.
And then we'll do the bracha together, which is Dayan Hammond.
Hey, madam. Touch your blouse here. And Rabbi, you ready to cut?
Uh-huh.
Oh, I'll grab it. Okay.
Sure.
Ready, madam? Your nose.
There you go.
Okay, so, okay. Okay, so Baruch Adonai Elohim Haolam Dayan Hammond. Okay, we are started. Okay, so now we'll get the pallbearers, and we will move the casket.
He'll turn it on. Gentlemen, we're going to stop here. We're going to pick up on the casket. We're going to place it on the black rollers. Pass it forward. Please keep the back lever open.
Thank you so much for doing that so smoothly. I can tell you've done this before. Alrighty. Okay, so for those who may need seats, we do have a few seats here available. So we are, of course, here for the funeral of Miriam Rosenblum Edelman. Miriam bat Michael Missel V'chaya Sarah Rosenblum. Kerachem Av al Banim Richam Adonai al Yereav Ki hu yada yitzreinu zachor ki afar anachnu Enosh kechatzir yamav ketzitz hasadeh ken yatzitz ki ruach avravo ve'einenu v'lo yakirenu od mekomo v'chesed Adonai me'olam v'ad olam al Yereav v'tzidkato livnei banim. As tender as a father with his children, the Lord is merciful with his worshippers. He knows how we are fashioned. He remembers that we are but dust. Days of a human being are as the grass. He or she may flourish as a flower in the field. The wind passes over it and it is gone, and no one can recognize where it grew. But the Lord's compassion for his worshippers, his righteousness to children's children, remain age after age, unchanging. Part of why we are gathered together is so that the life of our dear Miriam shouldn't just vanish in the wind, and so we're going to share some recollections and learn some life lessons from her. And to start off the process, I'd like to call on her brother, Rabbi Herb Rosenblum, to share a little bit about her education and the things that moved Miriam. You're lucky I left my outline somewhere else. Dear friends, I was telling Deborah that the last funeral I participated in was that of our other sister. Dina told me that was just a few years ago. She would have been the logical person to be talking in the vein that I'm going to be speaking. She was the one that was probably closer to Miriam. I was out of the house at the universities and so on, and Dina was managing affairs very effectively on behalf of the extended family, and she and Miriam were close-knit. I regard myself today simply as substituting generationally for Dina. She's gone, and now Miriam's gone, who would have been an alternative to some immediate family funeral, but of course she's not going to be able to share with us some of those thoughts. My life with young Miriam, there was a 9-year gap between us. Dina was a year older,
And Miriam went to Hebrew school across the street from our home at a very strongly Zionist, nationalist Jewish school, the National Hebrew School, everything in Hebrew. She became very well versed in that, and she met my future wife. Sheila and she were contemporaries at the school, and they both came out with the same strong commitment to a cultural Jewish life in the future, and it was just a lovely thing to watch, although my romance with Sheila didn't start till about 8 or 9 years later at Camp Masad. And Miriam also had been at Camp Masad. She was there the year that Dina was a head counselor of the girls, and so the relationship kept on blossoming. Miriam went off in a slightly different direction from the rest of us, who went into Jewish professionalism in a serious life-committing manner. And when she went to college, she was part of the generation of the late 50s, early 60s of the liberal groups. And that's where she met Marty, her ex-husband, and that romance blossomed as a combination of liberal-leaning people determined to do tikkun olam and shape a better world for everybody. I think history double-crossed them. When they got married, went to graduate schools, they became more and more interested in the Jewish component of the future of the world. And what happened was some very interesting developments. Miriam, for instance, when they were at Berkeley in California, was the executive director of one of the large conservative synagogues in Oakland, whose rabbi became a legend, Harold Schulweis. Some of you may have heard of Harold. I think he's still alive, and still, no? Baruch Dayan Emet for Harold. He was a good friend to many of us. And Marty developed an interest in his field of political science for the Israeli legal system, on which he became an expert. When they moved back to the New York area, they settled in Albany, and I don't know how much of this is privy to you, Deborah, and to Ruth, but Miriam was a force for development of the institutions of the Jewish community in Albany. She was a founding member of the committee to establish the Hebrew Day School in Albany, which a good friend of mine was the principal of, Phil Arian. Miriam also, surprising as it may seem, was the chairperson of the Community Council of Supervision of Kashrut in the Albany area. There were people who couldn't understand it then, there were people who couldn't understand it now, but she did an effective job of administrating the process. Now, they both had very active intellectual careers, and I remember with some surprise how they spent their several sabbaticals. One was in Nanking, China, where they were pioneers in the field of Jewish studies. I don't know how they handled the language barrier, but whatever it was, they regarded it as a successful and productive part of their careers. Then another one they spent in Liverpool in Britain, where they likewise added and contributed to the field of Jewish studies at Liverpool University. And needless to say, on the several sabbaticals they spent in Israel, Marty became an authority on the history of the development of the Israeli court system. To this day, I keep telling people, yeah, I know Marty, but he and my sister are divorced. So, in fact, he had lots of respect from his peers, and Miriam got to know a lot of these people very well and productively. So here we are today, essentially telescoping a long, productive life into a short event of memorial. Miriam aged surprisingly well. Sheila and I were always delighted to see how she handled her handicaps. I know that Ruth and Deborah took great pains in making that transition of life for her as meaningful and as beneficial as possible, and she benefited greatly and appreciated it greatly. And history pulled us back together when Sheila and I moved into Ring House and became regular visitors at Miriam's Smith Cobart house. So I want to simply share these thoughts with you of a brother who admired Miriam. Her prime admirer was my father, who loved intellectuals, who loved people who contributed to the future of the Jewish world. And he found in Miriam a very contributory person who could assist and shape Jewish life in whatever community she lived. So a blessing to her memory. I just loved watching her relate to my father, who was a very acute estimator of human talent, and tribute to him and to my mother and to Miriam and to Dina. It's a pleasure to be a part of this memorial to a wonderful woman.
Amen. Not a note. Hard to follow, but just be able to see. Okay, Ruth is going to speak as Twitter.
To me, my mother, Miriam, was larger than life. I don't know anyone with a greater capacity for love and for joy than her. In fact, in the last 24 hours, I've been amazed and touched by how many people have reached out to me from different parts of her life to let me know how much she meant to them. My mother was a thoroughly modern woman who grew up in a tenement on the Lower East Side of Manhattan. She was the youngest child of two immigrants from Palestine. Her father, Michael, was a rabbi who, as a young man, left Poland to escape conscription into the army and made his way to the Yishuv. And her mother, Chaya Sarah, was born in the old city of Jerusalem. She loved and was loved by her big sister Dina and her big brother Herbie, who, as you know, is here with us today. As a young woman, she received a classical American education at Hunter High School in New York, and then went every afternoon to Herzliya, where she learned Hebrew and Limudei Kodesh. She continued her education at the City College of New York, where she overlapped with Phil's mother, although we don't think they ever met. But at CCNY, she met my father, and they married soon after her graduation. Together, they moved to Berkeley, California, and then to Los Angeles, where I was born, and collected friends wherever she went. Later, when she moved back east, when my father got a job as professor at SUNY Albany, my mother worked as an economist at the state legislature. She, as my uncle mentioned, she was involved in her shoals and the Jewish community and was a founding member of the Vaad of Kashrut of Albany. My mother loved having guests, and we had friends and company over most Shabbats. And she opened her home to observant students and people who worked at the state legislature. And in fact, she hosted our now neighbor, Jules Polonetsky, when he worked in Albany. For much of her life, she loved to travel. And as we mentioned, collected friends wherever she went, from England to Israel to China. In recent years, as her health declined, she wasn't able to travel, but we were lucky that she moved locally, where we got to spend more time with her. My mother loved fiercely, and I felt that love every day of my life. And she loved her extended family, her cousins, nephews, nieces, great-nephews and nieces, and great-great-nephews and nieces. And she didn't make a distinction between those who were of her immediate family and those who married into it. Many of them could not be here today, but are with us in spirit. And I cannot imagine a better grandmother. My mother loved to reach her grandsons, and they loved to sit in her lap and bask in her love. She constantly sang to them. I think my mother had a song for every inch of Israel. And when she wasn't singing, she was humming. I remember when my mother worked with the boys to create a board game of their own, making up their own rules and pieces. One of the things she loved to do was tell them stories of the places she had gone and the people she had met, and most of all, of her family, of her parents, her big sister, and her handsome older brother, and the people she loved and who loved her. And even as her health declined, she was able to express that joy and love.
So true, so true. Okay, now I'm pleased to call upon my niece, Abby, who will speak on behalf of her mother, Lisa, who composed thoughts, I'm sure, with all of our perspectives in mind.
Absolutely. Dear Ruth, Deborah, Phil, Michael, and Jonathan, it was with great sadness that I heard the news early this morning about the death of your mother, mother-in-law, grandmother, Miriam Rosenblum Edelman, now sadly of blessed memory. Alana texted me as I was prepping for my Sunday morning Tanakh and Jewish history class. A group of New Yorkers that I've now taught privately for 17 years. I was quite and uncharacteristically emotional when I started my class and asked to dedicate this morning session to my Aunt Miriam, who died in her sleep this morning after numerous heroic and daunting confrontations with the Malach HaMavet. The heroism was hers, and the Malach HaMavet was, I am sure, daunted. That actually got a laugh. Miriam was effectively my aunt for more than half of my life, and my experiences with her were many and always memorable. She was a person of great contradiction, some features maddening, and many more endearing. Utter brilliance and cluelessness, head-shaking self-thought, and astounding generosity. Enviable for me, piety, and hilarious irreverence. These contradictory forces existed like Scylla and Jarvis in opposition to each other and could pose a challenge to those she loved and who loved her, which Miriam is this now. But while those contradictions did endure, so did the constants. Miriam's loyalty was fierce. Her curiosity was undiminished by age or physical condition, and her devotion to family was boundless. I can barely remember a conversation, and over the years there were many, both in person and on the phone, that didn't contain some element of Miriam self-righteously criticizing someone else's behavior and then laughing uproariously when I would suggest that she was capable of the same behavior. But when I do it, she would say with faint indignation, I know it's wrong and am fully capable otherwise. Conversations were roller coasters of praise, contentiousness, argumentation, and compliance. When we visited in Albany, she and I would talk into the wee hours of the morning, and she would pick up the conversation the next day with barely a comma or a semicolon, and she would repeat verbatim the previous night's conversation. My, she did love to chat, but she was also a very good listener. In her recall, there are no words. Dear Ruth and Deborah, as just occasional visitor, albeit a fellow chatter and accomplice, I suspect that my experiences with your mother were somewhat skewed, more rosy-hued than yours in everyday presence in her life. I'm well aware that the latter years in particular were immensely demanding for and of you. But it's crucial that you not only believe, but in fact know that and how much she loved and appreciated you both fiercely, unambiguously, and wholly. In our conversations about our daughters, your mother's words were always and only words of praise, pride, and indisputable love. In fact, I learned a lot from Miriam and Sheila about parenting daughters. And I can say quite truthfully as a parent who has swum more than a few casual laps in the mother-daughter fiery cauldron, what we say to our children directly and daily is not always what's felt in the heart. Miriam could be hard and judgmental, probably, in fact, certainly most often to you, but never about you. Dreams she had for herself, for a variety of complicated reasons, went mostly unrealized, but your professional successes were always and only a source of undiminished joy. Phil. Mothers-in-law are a tough gig in the best of circumstances. You mastered it, however, and I truly cannot recall a single harsh or critical word about you ever. Rather the opposite. Miriam loved and respected you, not only for your intelligence, critical according to the Rosenblum taxonomy of success, but as importantly, your love and dedication to your family. But to be fair, Phil, loving you is not a stretch. Michael and Jonathan, you are the recipients of the absolute greatest gift of all. Unconditional, unabashed, and unvarnished grandmotherly love. If you are hard metal drummers, lousy spellers or, God forbid, Republicans, your grandmother's love, adoration, admiration, etc., would remain unabated. There are not enough superlatives in the OED to characterize how your grandmother felt about the two of you. You'll probably have to Google OED. And to Miriam, all in all, that's a pretty good track record. And as they say in the South, bless your heart, you did real good. And as they say in places farther to the east, may your name be a blessing. Rest in peace, beloved aunt and friend. Much love, Lisa.
Amen. Well, I would like to take a moment to commend a couple of little things here that are so invisible because they're done with such smoothness. We have a setup that was designed in advance so that Kohanim could be part of this and yet not on top of it. I thought that was brilliant. and and I also want to give a special thanks to Beth Shalom and to Rabbi Anting for just quietly supporting the needs here and for flexibly giving us the space to do our own thing, which is really of inestimable value. Now, I took a risk by letting everybody else speak first, and you pretty much said almost everything that I had to say, which is fine. So I just want to add a couple of footnotes. One is that as we heard between the lines, Miriam did not suffer fools lightly, and she was a connoisseur of rabbis. There are rabbis in the world who have feet of clay. She had a radar for that, she when she felt it appropriate, she would identify them. On the other hand, there are rabbis, I'm thinking of one in particular, but there may be more than one, who she really bonded with, learned from, and had a fierce loyalty to, despite denominational boundaries, etc. And I certainly found that always to be commendable. Now, you may be wondering why it is that I didn't use the text of the Eshet Chayil here today. That was deliberate. The reason is this. Miriam had a solid Jewish education. She knows the model of what an Eshet Chayil is. And she viewed her mother as an Eshet Chayil. Her aspirations went in a different direction in a changing world. Now, she did things in the house, she did things outside the house. She very capably ran a state legislator's office. I don't think she particularly lectured to her daughters, but somehow subliminally passed along the message that you can be whatever you want to be. And so it's really, she didn't say your assignment is to be an Eshet Chayil. I mean, you can also be an Eshet Chayil, but the fact that one daughter got a doctorate and became a clinical psychologist, and one got a law degree and became a judge, I don't think that's a coincidence. She basically pointed people in the right direction and provided support, and that's why we're here today in the constellation that we're here, and it just deserves to be noted. All right, I'm gonna say a couple of brief prayers, which are going to be followed by the mourner's Kaddish, and then I will call upon all who are so moved to shovel some earth into the grave, because we take care of our own, and we only want to delegate a certain amount. We take a personal interest in what we're doing. We're here to share our sorrow, to bid farewell to Miriam Rosenblum Edelman. We recall the blessing of her life. We thank God for all that was good and true in her life, and for the precious memories which shall endure. Eternal God, Creator, merciful Father of all, your Your children, bowed in grief, seek light to dispel the dark gloom which threatens to overwhelm them. Be gracious to those who mourn, for they are in distress. Bless them with your compassion. Ease their burden of sorrow. Send them light and peace, for it is written, Fear not, as I am with you. Be not dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you. I will help you. I will sustain you with my power. And let us say, Amen. I also want to add before I chant the memorial prayer that if I were to assign a mission statement to Miriam, in retrospect, I would take it from the book of Amos, to do justly, to do that which is right, and Hatsnei Lechet, walk humbly with the Lord your God. She had her non-humble moments as well. We acknowledge that, but in the end, she had perspective, and we have great respect for that. I'm going to chant the memorial prayer. Those of you who are able might want to rise for the memorial prayer. El Malei Rachamim, Shochein B'Mromim, Amtsei Menucha Nechona, Tachat Kanfei Hashchina, B'Ma'alot Kedoshim U'Torim, Kizohar Kiyamazirim, Et Nishmat, Miriam Bat Harav, Michael Michal, V'Chaya Sarah, Shehalcha L'Olamah, Began Eden Tehei Menuchata, Ana B'Rachamim, Asirah B'Seter Knafecha L'Olamim, Utzror B'Tzror Chaim Et Nishmata, Adonai Hu Nachalata, V'Nomar Amen. O God, exalted and full of compassion, grant perfect peace in your sheltering presence among the holy and pure, to the soul of Miriam Rosenblum Edelman, who has gone to her eternal home. O Master of Mercy, we beseech you, remember all the wealthy and the righteous deeds that she performed in the land of the living. May her soul be bound up in the bond of life. The Lord is her portion, and may she rest in peace. And let us say, Amen. We now turn to the mourner's Kaddish. Yitkaral, Yitkadash, Shmei Rabbah, V'alma, Divrach, V'yitei, V'amlich Malchutei, V'chayachon, V'mechon, V'chayei, the full Beit Yisrael, V'agala, V'zman Kariv, V'imru Amen. Yehei Shmei Rabbah, V'arach, V'olam Alomei Almaya. Yitbarach, V'yistabach, V'yitpa'ar, V'yitramam, V'yitnasei, V'yitadar, V'yitaleh, V'yitalal, Shmei Dekudsha, B'richu. Le'elam min kol birchata v'shirata, tushbechata v'nechamata, damiran be'alma v'imru amen. Yehei shlama rabba min shmaya, v'chaim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael, v'imru amen. Oseh shalom yiramav, hu yaseh shalom, aleinu v'al kol Yisrael, v'imru amen. Okay, so now we have 2 shovels available. Many people observe the custom of using the back of the shovel for the first time so as to convey intuitively the idea that while we're doing what we have to do, we do it with a measure of reluctance. But having done it once with the back of the shovel, feel free to use the front of the shovel so we can also get the job done. Thanks.
Take a shift.
Yeah.
Yeah, what do you think? A little more around there? I don't want to do short. I just want to kill it.
Try to get it along the inside there somewhere.
Very nice.
Okay.
While we are finishing up here, I want to call attention to a couple of things. So we are pretty close here to a Ross cavern, meaning we've covered it with a full layer. At some point, we're going to leave this to the professionals from the cemetery, because we don't want to steal their job either. Then those who are able can come over to the Shiva house, which is on Ivy Mount. What's the number?
7817, but I think everybody's here.
Right. Okay. So that is what we're going to do, and so in a moment I will call on people to make two parallel lines, a shura that the mourners can walk through, and we will share with them the traditional, I don't know if I call it a greeting, but Hashem Yinachem Etchem B'Tov Sha'ar Avelei Zion B'Yerushalayim. May the Lord comfort and sustain you among the mourners for Zion and Jerusalem. Amen.
Yeah, we're covered.
Yeah.
You want to continue those? So I don't want to tell people to stop.
I do not want to tell people to desist because what you do is praiseworthy, but I would like to kind of release the mourners. So let's form those two lines over here. Yikaral, Yikadash, Shmei Rabbah, Vilma, Divrach, Yitei, and Lishma, Yitei, V'chayachon, V'mechon, V'chayei, the full Beit Yisrael, Ba'agala, V'zman Kariv, V'imur Amen, Yehei Shmei Rabbah, V'arach, V'olam L'omei Almaya, Yitarach, V'yishtabach, V'yitpa'ar, V'yitramam, V'yitnasei, V'yitadar, V'yitalev, V'yitalal, Shmei Dekucha, B'richu, Le'elam min kol birchata v'shirata, tushbechata v'nechemata, Damiran be'alma v'imru amen. Yehei shlama rabba min shemaya, v'chaim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael, v'imru amen. Oseh shalom yiramav, hu yaseh shalom, aleinu v'al kol Yisrael, v'imru amen.